right, so very good afternoon to all of you, our cherished viewers of Hot Issues on TV3, and welcome to another exciting edition of your favorite current affairs program. Now, it's the first day of July 2017, and this afternoon on Hot Issues, we're focusing on Ghana's diplomatic efforts. We also look at issues concerning the famous Gitmoto. Yes, the Supreme Court has ruled, but this afternoon we'll be joined by one person who knows a lot when it comes to diplomacy. After this short break, I'll be introducing my guest, and then we begin deliberations on all these issues. I am Winston Amoa, and this is Hot Issues. Stay with us. We'll be right back. All right, so welcome back from the short break, and thanks for staying with us. Now, my guest this afternoon on Hot Issues is a former Ghana's ambassador to the UN and also former foreign affairs minister and former member of parliament. My guest is Ambassador Victor Bell. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Very well. Great to see you.
Well, I'm doing quite well, and I'm happy to be here.
Great. So what's your assessment of the current government's diplomatic efforts so far, 6 months down the line?
Well, let me start by saying that I think it is too early to make any meaningful assessment of what they have done. But all the same, we can take it on a day-to-day basis.
Sure.
And I can say that within the 6 months, they've done quite well. The intention of diplomacy is to build good ties with your neighbors and with the international community generally. And this is what the president and his men have been busy about. He has already visited the neighborhood, that is our next door neighbors, and he's traveling a little more afield now. In addition to that, there are other commitments, statutory meetings of the AU, of the ECOWAS and so on, which he has to attend, and he's been doing quite well in attending those. Now, we have to wait to see the outcome of these visits in order to be properly able to assess them.
But there are those who say he's traveling too much. He has a work to do in Ghana. He seems to be everywhere around West Africa and Africa as a whole, and not in the country to work.
Well, you know, I'm not here to defend the president, but let me say this, that diplomacy has one aim, and that is to strengthen your relations with your neighbors and the international community. And if this is important for Ghana at this point in time, then he's doing quite well. Those who say that he's traveling too much perhaps are not aware of the fact that heads of state have to attend meetings at regular intervals at the ECOWAS level, at the AU level, and at the United Nations level.
Let's get to the NDC. Were you surprised they lost?
Yes and no.
Why yes, why no?
Yes, because if you recall, the last year of the former president's stewardship was very good. It was almost textbook success. And he was doing a lot, infrastructure and so on, which lulled most people in the party into believing that he would win at all costs. I dare say that I feel that even parliamentarians did not work hard because they were expecting what the president did to rub off them also. Now, on the other hand, they should have expected it because there was a lot of criticism under the table, so to speak, about the behavior of individuals in the party and those who felt marginalized and so on. And also, I believe that most of us forgot that the Ghanaian electorate is becoming more and more sophisticated and cannot go on to expect that allegiance to a region or to a tribe or an ethnic group would necessarily lead to votes in a particular way. In other words, unpredictability of the vote is becoming more and more a factor of elections in this country.
But if they were doing so well, if the last year was so good, why would the electorate, for instance, look at certain other things and not vote for them?
Well, I no apology for them. I am saying that this was the perception of the generality of the electorate. They felt that something was going wrong and that they were not working as they were expected to over time, you know. On the other hand, the president did extremely well in putting infrastructure up and so on. And the electorate, no one could predict, decided against them. And it has been accepted. The party will make necessary reforms and come back to compete.
Did you have any role to play in the elections? What role did you play?
No, I didn't. I'm a member of the Council of Elders. My role principally was to make sure that I voted and voted wisely. And I did that.
You did that. Apart from that?
No, apart from that, I did not take part in any campaigning or that sort of.
Did you offer yourself up?
No, there was a campaign team selected by the party itself, which did most of the work. What people like me could have done was in the constituencies to talk to people.
Did you do that?
Oh, yes, yeah, on an informal basis.
Would you have wanted to do more for the party?
I could have, but one is I've got to a stage now that I must give way to younger people to also show what they can do for this country.
Would you have done more if they had contacted you?
Yes, it depends on what they would want me to do.
What would you have wanted to do if they had contacted you?
Meetings here in Accra, talking to individuals and groups and so on, and also having something to say about preparations for the vote. You remember that there was a lot of hullabaloo over procedures and the role of the Electoral Commission and so on. I could have assisted in moderating the tension at the time. But we have very good party officers in the NDC, and they handled it very well.
Aspects of the Kwesi Botwe report says that your party neglected the structures of the party. I mean, the flag bearer, for instance, then President Mahama, neglected the structures. He neglected the executives of the party and formed, parallel teams, and that affected the party. You share that?
Well, in many ways, yes. But it isn't true in all respects.
In what ways is it true?
For example, if you go around the country, you'll find that the new leadership that came up in the constituencies took everything on themselves and left part of the committees that they served on at the branch level, at the constituency level. They left them aside. They owed allegiance directly to the president and to certain individual leaders in the party. And of course, this is not good for any party because you may win election, but you destroy the party in a process.
The president was accused by some members of your party of surrounding himself with his friends and cronies who worked against the party's efforts at ensuring victory.
Well, I think that he had friends and relatives and so on around him. It's true. We all saw it, and if you look at the records, it will show that. But to what extent they worked against him, I do not know.
But you believe that could have worked against him?
Oh yes, it is. The mere fact that there was a certain number of his family and of friends and colleagues around him was a factor that raised eyebrows at the time. I remember I had to discuss this with some friends and colleagues also.
Did you discuss that with him?
No.
Why didn't you?
Well, you know, the president was a very busy man, and it was difficult for him to find time to talk to some of us. He did his best. We talked to him at the beginning and at the middle, but towards the end, things hotted up, and he had to be on the go all the time and did not find time to discuss it with some of us.
Did he listen to you anytime you spoke with him?
Oh, yes.
Did you feel he did the things you wanted him to do?
Oh, yes. I remember that at the beginning of his tenure, we had a meeting with him at Flagstaff House, and we discussed many things, especially corruption in Ghana. We had just come in, and it was quite clear that if we wanted to make any impression, we should take a hard line against corruption. We discussed all that.
My guest this afternoon on Hot Issues is Ambassador Victor Gbeho. The Constitution Committee is out. They've called for a national healing tour. You want to be part of it?
Oh, certainly. I've spent a lot of my career moderating disagreements and being helpful to communities, especially outside this country, in bringing peace to war-torn countries and tension-ridden communities. And so I definitely would be flattered to be asked to do so, and I will do my best.
Should the NDC give John Mahama a second chance?
Well, that is something that is being discussed in the party right now, and I think it will be invidious for me to prefer any views on camera.
But personally, based on what you have seen, the sort of campaign that was run, the sort of textbook performance you say happened, should he be giving a second chance? You are an elder. Should he be given a second chance?
I do not know. We will have to ask the lawyers and the politicians.
The lawyers wouldn't decide for you, would they? It wouldn't go to court.
Well, everything ends up in the court.
Yes.
You know, so it is likely that it could go to court, you know. And so you will probably find that when you read the Constitution does not say definitely that he can do it or he cannot do it, you know.
Yes, but
and you know, so lawyers will have to
yes, but
interpret.
beyond the Constitution bit, realistically, should the NDC consider presenting John Mahama as its candidate for 2020?
The NDC is in the process of considering everybody. You know, even if President Mahama wants to be candidate again, nothing stops anybody in the party from competing him in the primaries. That is an internal party matter. And so the discussions are going on all around and it will be invidious for me to prefer any definitive at this point.
Finally on this bit, now there are those who argue that for a sitting president to lose election, he shouldn't think of coming back to contest elections again. If you were to advise, for you, if you were sitting president and you lost elections, would you have considered running again?
Well, I would have said that let us look at democracies all around the world and find out how they have handled this in the past. Talk to the Ghanaian people. They are the ultimate holders of power in this country.
Yes, but I mean, Jimmy Carter lost election. He didn't show up.
Yes.
Ford lost election. He didn't show up.
All that is true.
Yes.
Ghanaians may choose to be different. I do not know.
Would you have contested again if you found yourself in President Mahama's shoes?
there is always a temptation for a candidate who loses to want to come back to set the record straight, so to speak. And so I will not hold it against him if he thinks he can come back and win elections again. But it is not for him alone to decide. It is for the Congress of the party to decide. And discussions have started, which will be finalized at the Congress that we will have.
Well, so Ambassador Victor Gbeho is our guest this afternoon on Hot Issues. We go for a short break. When we return, there's more. We get to focus on, maybe finally on the NDC, and then we get into the Gitmo too. Stay with us. I'm Winston Amoah, and this is Hot Issues. All right, so welcome back from that break, and thanks for staying with us. This is still Hot Issues on TV3, and I am Winston Amoah, and my guest this afternoon is Ambassador Victor Gbeho, former Ghana's ambassador to the UN and former Foreign Affairs Minister. Were we right in getting the, accepting the Gitmo 2?
Well, you had a government elected by the people of Ghana, and its leadership, after holding discussions with a foreign power, decided to go in a particular way. They saw advantage in it definitely at the time. Whether this was right or not, only time would tell.
It's been some 1.5 years.
One should be careful in what one says about this.
Why should we be careful in the things we say?
Because it involves diplomacy, and one has always to be careful when it comes to diplomacy. Because whilst you may wish to batter your leadership for moving in one way, you also offend outside friendly countries.
We're a sovereign country, aren't we?
Absolutely.
So?
But the international community consists of sovereign countries. Our sovereignty is no more important than the sovereignty of others. So there must be a place where we'll get on a platform, discuss, and come to
but not when
acceptable.
Ghanaians are unhappy.
I have no doubt about that. But this is not the first time that a government has done something that the ordinary people are not happy about.
You're representing the interest of
now,
the people.
What should happen is that how do you get out of this sticky situation?
How do we get out of
That is
this?
the challenge. I think that the leadership should again have serious discussions with the Americans. Recall the reasons that made Ghana go that way a few years back, and also draw the attention of the foreign power to the strength of feeling in this country, especially from voters. Those who vote in this country are the owners of this country, and they say that they do not want it. No, however much the two governments see it, it has come to a point that where it has to be revised. Now, I'm saying that one has to be careful because there was an agreement. They didn't just take a phone and say, okay, bring them. They signed an agreement. They will be here until such and such a period, or they can decide against being in Ghana after a certain minimum period of time, and so on. There are many other things that go into an arrangement such as this, and also where they are supposed to be of good behavior when they are here. And also, there is a misinterpretation that I've heard listening to Ghanaians. These two gentlemen were not proven guilty of anything. They were among those whom the Americans collected all over the Middle Eastern countries in their effort to stop the spread of violence. And for the time that they spent in Guantanamo Bay, they were never brought to proper trial, and no guilt was raised against them.
Yes,
that's
but
number one.
In the Department of Justice's own report, it indicates that one of them was of high risk.
Yes. Now a government can say that somebody is of high risk.
And that should be of concern to us, shouldn't it?
No, it shouldn't. Otherwise,
this person
Kwame
who was
Nkrumah would
arrested,
never have been a president of this country.
he's a Ghanaian. These are not Ghanaians.
When President Kwame Nkrumah came into this country at first, the British government advised the administration here not to allow him to do many
Of course,
things.
because we're being ruled at the time by the British.
That's right.
But these are non-Ghanaians. They are from Yemen, so we should be concerned as Ghanaians if they are of high risk.
We are an international community. The world is not that of 1947. It is of 2017. And we are part of a global community. Travel and residence in each other's country is better facilitated now than it was 50 years ago. And so all that we can say is that our government then miscalculated, and therefore they should correct that. I don't think that we should go on to antagonize anybody because it can be done. Now the government will assemble its best negotiators, meet with the Americans, agree on what should be done, because there is also a law governing the expulsion of people, the removal of non-citizens from a country, agreement on where they should be going to. Are they going back to their own countries, or are they going to the United States, or are they going to a third destination? All this will take time to, but there is the decision or the strength of feeling of Ghanaians to take into consideration. Secondly, there is a Supreme Court decision.
Exactly.
That, and so our government has to work.
What would be the implication if Ghana decides to return these Gitmotu to the U.S.? What could be the implication?
There will be very little noise about this. What happens? They are put on an aircraft and sent wherever they have to go to. And that ends the matter.
Would you be surprised if we did that?
No, I will not. Especially in face of the very strong feeling against the whole deal. I mean, so much so that even religious groups, like the Catholic Bishops' Conference, who normally do not bother with political issues, had to issue a statement and so on. That shows the strength of feeling. Whether it is right or not, this is the feeling of Ghanaians.
The NPP at the time were against it. They felt that these people shouldn't have been in the country. Now they are in government.
Yes.
What do they do?
Well, I cannot speak for the NPP
Except that you can
especially.
so that you can advise them.
Well, leave it to diplomacy. We have laws in this country, and the law is quite clear on this. From now on, negotiations with the Americans will be, and the Americans have an embassy here.
Okay.
They know what is going on here, and therefore it should facilitate the discussions.
But what should be our position going into this negotiation? Of course, we eventually would, back down in a few, but going into this, what should be your initial position?
Oh, the initial position is that, unfortunately, it will no longer be possible to host the two in this country. A, because of the strength of feeling. B, because of the ruling of the Supreme Court, which government is enjoined to obey. And therefore, what do we do together? And then when you sit around the table, new ideas will come, and the people will leave, either permanently not come back here, or their case could be reviewed after so many years and so on. There are many options.
So the U.S. has brought some travel policies, if I could put it that way. Now, members of parliament would no longer be offered protocol services. Of course, we also know of what, the British High Commission had done by writing to parliament. Do you see the U.S. action as a retaliation?
Oh, no, I do not see it in that respect. I think that what many Ghanaians do not realize is that as far as the Western countries are today. They exchange information about immigration and so on. Now, if you go to one Western country and they refuse you a visa, you can be sure that they will inform the others. So you are not being smart if you, from the refusal from the United States, you are going to Germany and so on, as a number of Ghanaians have already found out. But it is also true to say that sometimes the attitude, the laws, and the administering of regulations in embassies here have offended public taste in this country. I recall quite clearly that when I was foreign minister, I had to come down heavily on one Western country because there was an officer there who said he would not approve more than 6 visas a day. And so you had Ghanaians going to queue outside that embassy from midnight, you know.
What was the reason? I'm just curious. What was the reason?
Yeah, it's what I told you, that he, as an individual, decided that he will not work on more than 6 a day, you know. And so it was a competition on who gets there first, you know. Now, that's not the way to do it. That's totally unacceptable. And we had to get them to change their ways.
We should get them to change their. We should get them to change their position.
Yes, yes. Sometimes our government or our governments are too chummy with the embassies here, and they tolerate a lot of things that our other colleagues in the sub-region do not tolerate. You know.
Come again. Come again.
Yes, there are certain attitudes and regulations from embassies, you know, against Ghanaians travel abroad, and we are docile, we accept them when other colleagues in the sub-region do not. We should work harder at that one and trying to change attitudes of those.
Let's look at an example. What are the examples? How are we docile, for instance, and how do we solve it? How do we deal with it?
I recall, and I will make myself the example. During my time, one Western country came and said overnight that Ghanaians passing through, just passing through their country, must have visas, and expensive visas at that also, just to pass through. If you take an aircraft that will stop in their country before going on, you still had to have their visa, which was expensive. I believe that we are still practicing it. Some of our colleagues refused to. And when they told that particular country that this would be unacceptable, they thought it was a joke, and they retaliated. You know, so sometimes.
Oh, you retaliated?
The African country, one of our neighbors. You know. Now the other thing is this.
Is it Nigeria?
I'm not going to say.
I expected that.
But then the other thing is this, that there are certain procedures that fly in the face of common sense. Here I will not be bashful about mentioning the British High Commission. What they are charging as visa fees is just simply too much. They should reconsider it, especially since they do not refund to you if you do not get the visa. All over the world, they do not refund, I know. But then it is within the reach of people. Compare the ratio of earnings and what the British are with other embassies, and you find that the British are making it more and more expensive for Ghanaians to discourage.
But it's a choice you make to go there.
Absolutely. But choices must go according to regulations and go according to international agreement. You know, it is because we have never rebelled against this. And if we did, if our governments took a strong decision, if our regional organizations called in the Western ambassadors.
What should be our rebellion?
Our rebellion is just to simply say that if you do that, we will also raise the fees of your people coming to whatever height we think is right. You know, and we give them preferential treatment. A British citizen or an American citizen or a French citizen can come to this country without a visa and get a visa at the airport. Which of them reciprocates? They do not, you know, and this is not. To a large extent, diplomacy is also about reciprocity, and we should, you know, pride ourselves in that card that we hold. Our government should be bolder in talking to these people.
Thank you very much, Ambassador
welcome.
Victor Gbeho, for joining us. Folks, that's all from us this afternoon on Hot Issues. Thank you so much for joining us. Do have a lovely weekend, and I see you on Monday on 3FM 92.7 on Sunrise. My name is Winston Amma. Bye for now.